this special sitting, and special welcome to Her Excellency the Governor, first visit to this court, welcome, and of course the Deputy Governor. This is a special sitting in honor of Justice Simmons, long service and contribution to the administration of justice. She has nearly over 30 years of service to the judiciary, and in many roles, including the magistrate, registrar of the Supreme Court, judge of the Supreme Court, supervising judge of the criminal court, acting justice of appeal, and the acting chief justice. So we have a large number of persons making contributions this afternoon. So please keep to the allotted time of 5 minutes. And in this, I first of all call on Mr. Melvin Douglas, the Solicitor General.
My Lord, I would like to first say, best according to protocol.
Yes.
I would like to say first, Your Excellency, Deputy, we also, former Chief Justice, we would like to also acknowledge the Her Majesty's Justices of the Supreme Court and Magistrates, the President of the Bermuda Bar, and the distinguished guests and members of the Bermuda Bar. I rise, my Lord, on behalf of the Attorney General and the Attorney General's Chambers to thank Madam Justice Simmons for more than 2 decades of distinguished judicial service as a Justice of the Supreme Court. I also wish to thank her for more, as your Lordship indicated, nearly 30 years of judicial service, and also her prior service as a member of the Bermuda Bar. My Lord, much can be said about a judge's role in interpreting and upholding the law as laid down by statutes by the legislature. But if one has to define the important interpersonal qualities of a judge, we may all agree that courtesy, patience, compassion, moral courage, honesty, and fairness will rank amongst the top priority or top qualities. I would offer to say, my Lord, that we have all witnessed, those who are members of the bar, over the course of Madam Justice's career, that she has displayed all of these qualities and more in dealing with members of the bar and the public at large. And we wish to further thank her for bringing such fine qualities to her role as a Justice of the Supreme Court, and wish her well in her retirement. I also, my Lord, wish to make mention that the Attorney General wishes to specifically acknowledge the increased appointment of female justices, which is a welcome characteristic of a modern and progressive judiciary. Those are my brief remarks, my Lord, and I wish Madam Justice Simmons all the best.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Douglas. Now I call upon the Shadow Attorney General, Mr. Puisne.
May it please your lordships, and more importantly today, your ladyship. Protocol having been established, barristers are often accused of speaking too long, and I note that the 5 minutes that the learned Chief Justice allocated had been reduced by 3 on a phone call earlier, so I will keep it brief. For the purposes of today, I stole a page out of Delroy Duncan's playbook from a few years ago at a different retirement speech, and I decided the best way to find out about a retiring judge was to ask the court staff. None of them were prepared to go on record. The comments that were made to me are not appropriate for the decorum of today. They were very positive, some of them off color. The theme, of course, your ladyship, was firm but fair. And I think all in this room today can agree with that. I don't need to address the court on her ladyship's background. It is well known, Bachelor of Science degree from Maryland, owing to Buckingham with honors, blazing a trail, because of course Buckingham was a university in which many Bermudians later attended, so they followed in your footsteps, your ladyship. You were called in 1984, almost, dare I say it, 40 years ago, and have served with distinction both as a barrister and a judge in service to these islands. We all have our own stories about her ladyship, I'm sure. I have one. I appeared before her when she was an acting justice of the Court of Appeal. As I came second, I make no comment on your wisdom, your ladyship. It is said that good lawyers know the law, but great lawyers know the judge. We in this room and we at the Bermuda Bar have come to know this judge very, very well, and if I may say so, fondly. So thank you for your years of service to this island. No doubt that service will continue in another capacity, but we're extremely grateful. Thank you, Your Ladyship, Your Worships.
Yes. Thank you, Mr. Bierman. I now call upon the Director of Public Prosecutions, Ms. Clark.
May it please my Lord, good afternoon. My Lord, when Justice Simmons was first sworn in as an assistant justice and eventually as puisne judge, she would have had to take a judicial oath, as all of you had to do. That oath was to do right to all manner of people, without fear or favor, affection or ill will. I can attest, since I too started around those times in these courts, that Justice Simmons has been true to that oath. She has brought to this court not only her abundant wisdom, so I differ from my learned friend, the Shadow Minister, but I've appeared in front of her a few more times than he has. And that wouldn't have been allowed. But not only her abundant wisdom and her fairness, but also her passion for the truth. She had an enormous capacity to listen, not only to what was said directly, but also to what was left unsaid. She had good sense, good grace, good humor, and good courage. My lady had tolerance for all, including a young upstart who would eventually stand before her as the first Bermudian-born female puisne judge, as the first Bermudian-born female DPP. As a mentor, she has inspired many, but perhaps none more than her former clerks. And again, I don't know who my learned friend, the Shadow Minister, spoke to, but the people I spoke to spoke of your kindness, your patience as a teacher, and of your thoughtfulness. If I may also speak for the female members of the bar, we will forever be mindful of our too big earrings, our inappropriate footwear, and heaven forbid, the exposure of our wrists. You exemplified the culture of this court, a court that is rigorous but respectful. In your many years on the bench, you have done justice, personified kindness, and walked humbly. We will miss you greatly, but we shall not forget the lessons that you taught us by your words, and more importantly, by your example. So on behalf of the department, we wish you all the best in your retirement.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. I call upon George Jones, the President of the Bar Association.
My Lord, it's a bad disguise. Somewhat taller and not as dashing, but Mr. Jones can't make it today, I'm afraid, and I received a call at the 11th hour this morning. I was going to make an application for an adjournment while I prepared, but then I realized it was only 5 minutes or less. Now, we've had some debate, as I'm on the list to speak twice, that I perhaps get 10. But I'll leave that with your Lordship and try and push through. So on behalf of the bar, my lady, and speaking for Mr. Jones as the President of the bar and myself as a member of Bar Council, the bar is indebted to your ladyship for her years of service. Your ladyship is highly, highly regarded and always has been in the eyes of the members of the bar. I think that the one thing that is of note is that your ladyship always had everyone bring their A game in every sense. And I was asked by a junior in my office today what I was doing when I was ironing my robe to come here. Well, that's a fact, and these cuffs would cut you. So I know, as my learned friend, the DPP had indicated, I remember being told off once about, Mr. Pettingill, I can see your hirsute wrists. And it was always a case of being kept in check, not only in manner of dress and attitude, but also in doing the very best that one could in making a presentation before your ladyship. And the bar and the members of the bar are grateful for those things. So thank you on behalf of a grateful bar for your years of service. Now, Mark, letting you, I think, my lord, if I can speak this time. Unless your lordship was speaking to stand down until the end. If I may, a few comments on the personal front. I have had a long history with her ladyship. My first appearance in the Supreme Court was with her ladyship appearing as defense counsel. And she came over to me and introduced herself. Anybody that knows me personally knows that I have a certain ilk for a certain type of lady. So this tended to knock me a bit sideways when this very beautiful lady some years ago, still very beautiful today, came over and introduced herself and said, "Hello, I'm Charles-Etta Simmons." And I was just besotted and Charles responded, "My name is Park Meddingfield," or something like that, entirely knocked sideways and thrown off balance for the rest of the day. I went on to appear in front of her on her first day as a magistrate. I appeared in front of her on her first day in the Supreme Court. And I also appeared in front of her on her last formal day in the Supreme Court. I'll come to that in a couple of minutes because there's a bit of a story to be had there. People that got to know professionally in appearing in front of Justice Simmons would have come to know the meaning of the Simmons stare. And this was really something along the lines of when one was making a submission, there would be a certain stare that was developed that was not intimidating, but was somewhat stern. And for those Latin scholars in the group, had that basic overtone of "milgere, here come," which roughly translated means you're trying to milk a male goat. So you better move on. Again, it was one of those things that made you bring your A game when you're making a submission to your ladyship and to know when you were beating something in a dead horse. And it was time to best move on in a different direction. I'd be remiss if I didn't comment, I think, on and many others were saddened at the loss of her dear husband, Femi, late last year. He was my doctor of many years, as with other people here at the bar, and also a very, very dear friend. I know that he is in spirit here today to have had the pleasure of spending time with them personally was a great delight to my memory. They were dynamic, a wonderful intellectual couple, and a lot of fun to be around. I remember on one occasion that there was a certain debate that was going on. They weren't often on the same side, to my memory. That was more by design than anything else. But it was a lot of fun, and Femi leaned over to me and said, "Of course, Charles is right." Remember the quote from Henry Ogden. And that quote was that to men, or husbands in marriage, to keep your marriage brimming with love in the marriage cup, whenever you're wrong, admit it, and whenever you're right, shut up. I carried that for many years, and I think it served me very well. So I appreciate Femi for that, and miss him dearly. Just, my lord, briefly on that last appearance in the court a couple of weeks ago, I received a telephone call from the clerk of the court to say, "Where are you? You're not where you're supposed to be." And I realized, for whatever reason, I was supposed to be appearing in front of her ladyship on the mention. So like Batman, I thrust on the cape and dashed down to the court. I walked in, luckily other things were going on, and my learned friends, Miss Clark, the DPP, and Miss Christopher were there. And I anticipated that I was up for something of a scolding, being tardy. I made sure I was well dressed when I walked in, but being tardy, and I had a series of reasons and apologies in my mind. Now, luckily for me, what happened, and I think this is a message for junior members of the bar: if you run into a spot of bother, always try and pivot and move in a different direction. So the pivot presented itself well when suddenly someone's telephone started playing a dance tune. And it wasn't mine, it was Christopher's. So at this point, there was a scramble there. So and then out came the Simmons stare, right? So it's a scramble to turn off the phone, and within moments, my lord, another telephone starts ringing. And it's the learning DVP's telephone. So, two telephones ringing. I saw this as a marvelous opportunity, not only to save myself, but to throw my friends under the bus. Right? Of course, one has to, you're now appearing with the holy trinity of successful, iconic black women in the courtroom, and I'm thinking, how can I get out of dodge here as best I can? I began to make a submission on that they should both be found in contempt. And I could see the Royal Gazette headline, and I thought this would be a great way for her ladyship to go out. Heaven knows it doesn't leave much for the Royal Gazette to make a great headline, and I thought this was it. I got the Simmons stare, and no one was found in contempt. It was a valiant effort, I dare say, and I was obliged to my friends for allowing me the pivot. My lord, I would be remiss, I think, in turning seriously to a moment in many judgments over the years that her ladyship has given. But the one standing judgment in my mind, of course, is De La Roche on same-sex marriage, which stands, at least in this jurisdiction, as the one ruling that was unappealed, that was right, in various respects. That set out in unequivocal terms what human rights and equal rights should be about. The Privy Council comment on it, even though they got it wrong. I can say that. At least the majority of them. And that really was a significant and wonderful judgment, and stands the test of time. Just because the government choose to go on and change the law wasn't a reflection of that significant judgment by your ladyship, for which we are all, and I say that, I think on behalf of a grateful bar, thankful for the ruling and the time that was spent on that most important judgment, and many others. So, my lady, thank you. I wish you all the very best. One hopes that certainly perhaps this is not the last time that we see you in the courtroom. I certainly know a little firm down the road would be happy to have you knock on the door and say, I'd like to come and do some work. They'd always be welcome. But thank you so very much for all of those years of service, for the laughs and for the lessons. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Pettingill. Mr. Lynch.
Lord, it's not the first time I've been kept waiting by Mr. Pettingill. And I was tempted to address you all from the dock, being the only place with any real space to express myself, and no doubt somewhere where many would like to see me. But I am flattered to be asked to speak and say a few words on your retirement. I relish the opportunity to make a final submission, which cannot fail, and which is unlikely to be appealed. It is in 2009 that I first appeared before you. And having spent 25 years working in the rather staid corridors and confines of the English legal system, it was here that I first came, practicing abroad, with one John Perry, Queen's Counsel, representing a chap charged with murder on Elbow Beach. And I sat, I think, almost here. And in, my lady, you walked, and I gasped. A woman? I wasn't expecting that, because there weren't, frankly, very many women sitting as judges in the UK. And I'd been told your name was Charles. And then I looked again at black. Well, there weren't any of them in the UK. And then I noticed you had dreads. The only people in the UK with dreads sat there. You represented the total antithesis of what I had experienced, and what a breath of fresh air it was. You were generous and welcoming to me and the other practitioners from overseas. You were always kind to court users and administrative staff. It's a good lesson for all judges to remember that. You remained judicial on the bench throughout. At the end of the trial, I came away with a very warm, glowing feeling about the bar and the bench here in Bermuda, and the staff. Of course, a probably helped that I'd secured an acquittal, but I was very taken with Bermuda. And I returned a year later. I was before Mr. Justice Greaves. Added a certain frisson to my experience of Bermuda, but then he's not a Bermudian. And it didn't stop me, because little did we know that you would be calling me to the bar some 6 years later. Apropos, permit me to pick a small bone, if I may, because on that occasion you said it was rare indeed that you called someone to the bar who was older than you. Well, now I know the retirement age that is not true.
Older in the law.
I'm happy to concede you've worn a hell of a lot better than I have. Over the years, I've appeared before you many times. Some wins, some losses. But I've never, ever had a client who thought that he'd had an unfair trial. He might not have liked the result, but he didn't feel he'd been unfairly treated. That's an important lesson, too. It is testament to your impartiality, irrespective of your personal view, to your bravery, sometimes in the face of public opprobrium, and a lack of pomp that leads litigants to feel that they've had a fair hearing in your court. It's no mean feat to do that in a career as a judge. In common parlance, it's what we might call being a good judge. In my respectful submission, that is the greatest accolade, the best legacy a retiring judge can have. That people after you've gone say, she was a good judge. These are big shoes to fill, I say, looking to my left. There can be no doubt that your contribution to the administration of justice in this jurisdiction will be held as a beacon, not just for black women with locks, but for everyone, particularly Bermudians, and not just at the bar, but in society as a whole, regardless of their careers. Last year, the United Kingdom sensibly changed their retirement rules so that judges could retire at 75 rather than 70. I am saddened that we are not practicing in the United Kingdom. You have still, in my submission, much to offer. And I can only hope that we take advantage of your experience and ask you to come back and sit as an assistant judge of this Supreme Court. I've been asked to submit on behalf of the visiting bar to those I have spoken to since, who had practiced here over the years, in particular John Perry, from England and Wales, and as a venture of Lincoln's Inn, that you retire with the grateful thanks and appreciation of those who have over the years been privileged to appear before you from, as I say, overseas. Before I sit down, may I make one final submission? Live up to your name. Charles is derived from the Old English name Chur, means free man. And you are indeed free of the shackles of office. So enjoy your retirement. Come and see us all whenever you can. But most of all, have fun. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Lynch. I believe we have Ms. Harvey next.
Okay. Let me make paper.
Thank you. May it please you, Lord Chief Justice, the Lady Justice Charles-Etta Simmons, the Lords and the Ladies. I'm delighted and honored to add Lord Dayton's submissions on the occasion of the special sitting to commemorate your retirement as a puisne judge in these islands. After long and meritorious service, I crave leave to associate myself with all the other congratulatory and many kind remarks about Justice Charles-Etta Simmons on her retirement from the Bermuda. I dare say from early in her judicial career, Justice Simmons signaled that her reputation as an independent thinker would stand her in good stead and continue to be a feature in her career as a jurist. The classic example, of course, being the well-known judgment redefining the institution of marriage in the Godwin case, which is referred to earlier in this special sitting. For those who have been following Justice Simmons' judicial career, they would also have noticed that she brought a humanitarian touch to her judicial duties, which is very rare and most beneficial and remarkable. She did not hesitate to criticize constructively the Bermuda government over the delay in returning the administration of justice to normalcy following the start of the destructive COVID-19 pandemic in early 2020. In my respectful view, showing once more a balanced view as senior criminal judge of this jurisdiction, since justice delayed is often justice denied. The defense bar, and indeed all Bermuda, owe Justice Simmons a huge debt of gratitude for having, since her historic appointment as the senior criminal judge of this jurisdiction, successfully ironed out the kinks to ensure that we have a smooth working system for the proper administration and disposal of criminal cases which are sent from the magistrate's court to the Supreme Court for trial and indictment. Justice Simmons has been known in her private life to be an altruist and someone who shows compassion and generosity, especially for those suffering in times of disaster, notably hurricanes in our region. Indeed, her dearly departed husband and herself were always early out of the box to support any such cause. And such support is always good. May I take the opportunity to thank Justice Simmons for her and her family for their support over the years, and to wish her a lovely and peaceful retirement. I decided that it was an interesting time to ellipse some of my remarks in view of the fact that some of our comments obviously on the conscious. I'm much obliged.
Thank you, Tom.
The next speaker is Mr. Warner. Well then, Mr. Smith. Mr. Smith.
Lord. Thank you. My Lord, I was asked to say a few words today by Mr. Quayle, and they are, she is too young to retire. But that's probably not sufficient. So I'm going to ask you to imagine this, London, in the late 70s, early 80s. Parts of it are still
dark and funereal, not yet permeated by the color and gaiety of European culture. That was where we arrived. That was Middle Temple Bay. It's like being in a university campus surrounded by old brick buildings, flanked on both sides by the great libraries of the Inner Temple and the Middle Temple, and the ancient Templar Church and its horizontal statues of crusaders, Dan Brown having not yet seduced the hordes of Americans which were yet to come. The Brits were British, and the foreigners, well, they were foreign. That was how I found myself walking from my chambers in Harcourt buildings one day, listening to the local chatter. I had not been home for over 10 years. And all of a sudden, a once familiar Bermudian accent ascended. And there she was, chatting in what was almost another language to the locals. We became friends. She had no lungs. She visited with us at my flat in London, in South London. And ultimately, she needed, as you did in those days, I don't know if you still do, a bencher to sign her call form so that she could be called to the bar. So Sir Anthony Cripps, my head of chambers, just happened to be the under-treasurer of the Middle Temple at that time, and the bencher. And so he agreed. And she came to our chambers. I'm sure it must have been for high tea, very civilized chambers. Every afternoon at 4 o'clock, the clocks would bring tea out and we could talk to each other. She came, and I do recall Sir Anthony saying to her, "Charles-Etta, your father wanted a boy." And then she went home. I was still there, and I wanted to go home as well. I was also wanting to get back to the sun. So I returned. And I believe I'm right in thinking that she went to work for Richard Hector, who had been a magistrate previously in Bermuda. We had at least one case together, a matrimonial case, I recall. She doesn't recall it, but I do. And then from there, she set up her own firm, Simmons and Co. And as has been already stated, she became a magistrate and then registrar. She was actually an awesome registrar. I crossed swords with her on a number of occasions, all in very good humor. I think we both enjoyed it. Then in 1999, I think she became a judge. I was so proud of her. That girl in the temple with the Bermudian accent had become a Supreme Court judge. A judge who spoke like us. A judge. And an excellent judge he has been. And if you look around you, my lord, you will see the young people who follow in her footsteps. Now on the bench with you, who came up in these islands to speak like us. That, to me, my lord, is her legacy. She just got better. And I appeared before her on a number of matters. But I thought her crowning achievement was the case that Mr. Kennedy referred to, which was the De La Roche case. And it was brave and courageous ruling that she gave, which made same-sex marriage legal, recognizing that discrimination has no place in our society. She married Femi, my dear friend, in 1997, who she shared with us for almost 25 years. He would be so proud of her today. We had many happy occasions that my wife and I at each other's houses, at the Bermuda Festival, shows like the Jazz Fest which we used to have, and just out together generally at dinner. Now she has reached retirement. She is still too young. I salute you, my friend, my learned friend, Honourable Justice Charles-Etta Simmons, for an outstanding career and a wonderful person.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Ms. Crispa.
Protocol having been established, I'll try to speak up because I always get in trouble for that. It is indeed an honor to be called upon to speak upon the retirement of Mrs. Justice Simmons. At this stage, I'm one of only maybe 3 or 4 people in this room who remember when she was an advocate before the courts. Freshly minted, I was a court clerk. I hadn't even gone to law school or anything like that. And she was around the court. She had that case of those 6 guys from Devil's Hole at that time. I think that might be your first, was your first case, because I was only here 84 to 85. So you must have been, somebody said you were called in 1984. You must have been like fresh at the bar. But you had such a conspiratorial sense of enthusiasm about what you were doing that it was positively inspirational. You were with the heavyweights. I think Richard Hector was in that trial and a few others. After that, next time I saw you, you were swept up in public service. You were on the bench as a magistrate, and I was around for that. I think you were in the family court, and what I remember of that is, like, I never leave family court feeling like it was fair, but somehow when you were there, I felt like I was leaving, and it felt fair, whatever, because of the way you determined matters and the way everybody had a chance. That's not to say it's not fair, magistrates court. It just never feels fair. To be fair. Then you were a registrar, and that sense of fairness was there, but it was a bit more complex because then you were more elevated. But you were also, I thought, very approachable. And in that respect, 2 particular instances stand out. About 25 years ago, when I was still relatively young, but not really that young, unfortunately, but it was still like a scary, intimidating institution to me. And I had a civil trial that was supposed to come on, and my best friend died, and I had this trial the next day, and like I was afraid to call and all that sort of stuff. But I just was able to call you as the registrar, and I gave that problem right over to you. And of course, I'll come to talk about the next time. I mean, that time I was so choked for words I couldn't speak, and I'll come to talk about the next time. I was so choked for words I couldn't speak in front of you. The second instance that I can recall when you were a registrar was immediately upon the conclusion of an inter-parties hearing. I was in your chambers in the registry, probably doing some family law thing. And you tried to suggest to me that I should get to know your son. Of course, I had never met your son, and had I met him, I would have said, "Oh my gosh, he's so handsome, but he's way too young." But of course, I said, "Well, I don't think he's my type." At which stage, you looked at me very quizzically. In any event, then you became a judge, not as approachable as you had been, of course. Plus, I was always in trouble. I was in trouble for being soft-spoken. And unlike everybody else who was always in trouble for wearing white, red, high-heel shoes or showing their arms or whatever, I was always in trouble for being untidy. And I used to wear like a bib, but it was always off to one side and what have you. Even today, in terms of my tabs, these are my tabs. I swapped them up with Quaaludes tabs, which are considerably fine. Yeah, I think at one point you had me mic'd so that the entire court could hear me around. get me a much better order, though. I eventually started dressing like the guys, and I didn't work with bed and all that sort of stuff. During your time as a judge, I felt that you dealt elegantly and simply with many difficult legal points, especially in drug cases, confession cases, and all those sexual offending cases that I was doing. And I spent many a night picking through your rulings, either by myself or Lord Simmons and Warner, with Vicky and Archie Warner, the rum and coconut water, pondering. Which brings me to the second time I got choked up, which was only a couple of weeks ago, which was my last appearance before you, getting choked up. And my colleague, my colleague Charles Richardson spoke in front of me, and he was very, like as usual, but very brief, and he said, you know, like only 10 words, like you've given us a lot of love and a lot of licks. Remember that? Yes. And that was like the first time I actually really thought about the moment, like it was like it felt really epic. This was the moment, it's the last time. So I was in a bit of a realization, and I couldn't speak. And the question I have now is it over? Which brings me to the more controversial part of what I have to say. Because I think this court has a certain way of judging that not everybody has. And certainly in the past 15 years, there have been other traditions or ways of judging that have evolved. And many in this jurisdiction are more knowledgeable about that other tradition of judging that existed as opposed to your tradition of judging that exists. And so I'm taking probably more than 5 minutes, my time to call to everybody here in whatever capacity they come before the courts to honor our traditions as set out by Mrs. Justice Simmons, our best and our brightest, fair, but when she has to be, an iron fist cloaked in a velvet glove. Whether she decides for you or against you, it just said right. It always feels right. Even you may appeal, but nobody felt that they were treated badly. You demonstrated that justice can only be meted out with humanity. And you brought a great deal of humanity to our courts. And that no matter who you were addressing, whether it's counsel, court associate, mentally ill defendants, hardened murder suspects, or habitual criminals, you looked each one in the eye and gave us all the same courtesy and humanity. You never looked down on anyone who appeared in front of you. Each person treated with respect. As a Bermudian, woman, lawyer, property, like I have, you're property, will always cherish you with pride. Thank you for your yeoman service.
Thank you, Ms. Christopher. Mr. Edward Simmons.
My lords, ladies, protocol hasn't been established, and so many wonderful things haven't been said. I can be very brief. Look, I rise on behalf of all the members of my firm, and I think for all those people who couldn't be here today, to offer our warmest and best wishes to the Loretta Judge on the occasion of her retirement from the bench after a long and successful career. I had an apology, my lord, if you cough. I had this manic cough. In the world that we live in now, you cough, you frighten the universe. There we are. I would note that it is a shame that her late husband, Dr. Femi Bada, who we lost last December, is not here to witness this event, a terrible loss to Bermuda and to her ladyship, your Simmons. It's been a pleasure for me to have known Mrs. Simmons for many years. Equally, it's always been a pleasure to appear before her as counsel in these courts. Having done major trials and other significant applications before her,
I know that she was always courteous to counsel and to the parties before her, kind but firm in her dealing with parties and counsel, fair, such that everyone appearing before her always felt that they had been listened to. She was always thoughtful in her judgments, and even if you did not agree with her, you understood entirely why she disagreed. She epitomized what a good judge should be, as has been said already, and her presence on the bench will be much missed. I don't think I could let this day pass without a reference to the most important case that I ever tried before her, and a case that's been mentioned earlier, the first of the same-sex marriage cases under Godwin, which I argued on behalf of the Human Rights Commission. There have been several same-sex marriage judgments, but Godwin was the first and the most important because that was the first case to establish that same-sex marriage was lawful in Bermuda. That judgment was as courageous as it was brilliant, and it led the way for everything that was to follow, including civil unions, which we now have as a consequence of that judgment. And so we owe civil unions to the learned judge, and many people don't necessarily appreciate that fact. We have civil unions for one reason, because of that courageous judgment. That judgment made important law and set us down a more enlightened path. At the time of that judgment, polls in Bermuda showed that the majority of people here opposed same-sex marriage. Since that judgment and the introduction of same-sex marriages and so many taking place, people saw that there was nothing to fear. And the latest polls this year show that the majority of people in Bermuda, the majority of Bermudians even, now favor same-sex marriage. And so there's been a sea change in Bermuda, regardless of what has happened recently in the Privy Council. And whilst, as I said, other judgments followed, and the Privy Council has, in their infinite wisdom, overturned one of the later same-sex marriage cases, the Ferguson and Bermuda case, on the basis that that latter case was wrongly decided. Mrs. Simmons' decision in Godwin remains intact and remains valid based on the Human Rights Act as it was before it was bizarrely amended by the government. It was not based on the Constitution, so that case actually still stands. And that's important because the moment that we have the change of government, or a different government with a different disposition, even if it's the same government, it will be very easy to change a couple of words only in the Domestic Partnership Act and make same-sex marriage lawful again, based on the analysis in Godwin by your ladyship. Mrs. Simmons was always a trailblazer, as we have heard, and as such, we wish her a happy retirement. I wonder if the learned judge would consider accepting arbitration appointments in her retirement, because if she were to consider that, she would be in great demand. So, my lady, whatever it is that you decide to spend your time in retirement doing, and no doubt, on behalf of all of us, no doubt, I wish you well. Thank you for the time and energy that you put into the idea of justice, as well as to the justice system in Bermuda. Thank you and best wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Charles-Etta. Is Victoria Piano going to be joining us? Yes. Yes, Ms. Piano.
Good afternoon, Chief Justice, Justice Simmons, members of the judiciary, fellow members of the bar, family, colleagues, and friends, distinguished guests. Lordship in waiting Quelo, thank you for being able to say a few words electronically on the occasion of this special sitting. Chief Justice, please permit me to pay tribute wearing the robes of a Yoruba woman, which her ladyship is acquainted with, and in tribute to Dr. Fenwick. At the same hour, I will be witnessing my godson exchanging his wedding robes. In keeping with the old Bermudian tradition, in years past, the whole island closed at noon every Thursday Our weddings would usually take place on this day of the week. Our decorations were made of colored tissue paper flowers and hand-picked fern. Tables laden with bottles of mineral in bright colors, full of fancy sandwiches and slices of plain and rum-infused fruitcake. This was the standard non-bank account breaking traditional At weddings, couples solemnly pledge each other their hearts, themselves, and their money. Given the cost of modern weddings, there is probably no money left to promise to give to each other. Speaking of solemn pledges, Justice Simmons has faithfully kept the judicial oath to do right by all manner of people without fear or favor, affection or ill will, and has continued to carry this out fairly and justly. Perfection in judicial temperament has been described by American jurist Hennessy as requiring knowledge of the law and its application. But of course, this may just be the easy part. Diligent, unfailing courtesy without sacrificing fairness, even-handedness, while retaining regard for the individuality of each person, restraint, courage, and strength in the face of criticism, and above all, integrity. This sounds like it is describing Madam Justice Simmons, doesn't it? You exemplify judicial excellence, epitomizing dignity, giving and receiving respect. You are a master communicator, able to explain decisions so that the most erudite and very literate understanding. You listen to the applications of Queen's counsel as carefully and patiently as the junior, newly called barrister or litigant in person. This is because you know and believe in your heart that all are equal before the law. While doing so, you have been firm, insisting things be done right and that we operate to a high standard, in accordance with the rules, and that we strive for continuous improvement. The day following my call to the bar, I appeared in the magistrate's court, where Justice Simmons was presiding. There was a case involving motorcycle speeding, in fact. Unfortunately, I was the defendant. I was not impressed at all, and made sure that I knew that was not the way to commence one's legal career. There are responsibilities, expectations, and standards that come with being a member of the bar. I do not know if my legal brethren were as scrutinized as we legal sisters were on the rules of dress code when we appeared before Justice Simmons. No ostentatious jewelry, no suicide heels, and like Henry Ford's original cars, you can wear colors as long as it's black. In the many matters in which I appeared before you with those I was entrusted to represent, I and they felt heard and fairly treated, even when the decision did not go our way. I suspect all those who came before you, win, lose, or draw, would agree. Thank you. The Bermuda we were born into, 10 years apart, was not a fair place for a lot of people, including women of color, born to parents not unfamiliar with struggle, but who persevered for themselves, their children, their grandchildren, and other people's children. Our village taught the importance of education, hard work, the value of common sense, and that it is not always so common and can be hard to find. We learned that respect is golden and to acknowledge that we stand on the shoulders of others. Pioneering Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg said, "Whatever you choose to do, leave tracks. That means don't do it just for yourself. You will want to leave the world a little better for your having lived." Justice Simmons, you leave deep tracks for us to follow. Your example is guidance, your capacity to hear, your courage, your dedication, your even-handedness, balance, and passion for justice for all. You have had a powerful, positive impact on the good administration of justice in our country. We are not always good at acknowledging and valuing our people, too often looking elsewhere for champions and people to save us. Often slow to recognize we are the ones that we have been waiting for. As your friend, former Judge Archibald would say, in making a strong submission, I say this boldly and without fear of contradiction. You have made this a better field. You have, by your example, made judging better, and we miss you already. We do not know your future plans. I heard about some travel in the future and something about a tennis tournament. You have earned time for yourself and for rejuvenation. We want you to enjoy it to the fullest, but we also need to continue to have the benefit of your experience and wisdom. You should be asked to continue to serve in an official capacity. With your energy and vivaciousness, you are not really suited for retirement and don't seem to be the retiring type. And even though someone else can do your job, no one else can take your place. Thank you for caring about justice. Thank you for caring about us. A grateful nation thanks you.
Thank you, Ms. Bierman. I hope Justice Simmons to say if she has.
I've never refused to say it. I've never refused to speak. I have probably not wanted to say just a few words. But Your Excellency, my family, friends, and invited guests, and especially the members of the legal community that are gathered here today to bid me farewell, to commemorate a long career in the law, and especially on the bench. There have been many speakers, and so I want to spare you having to hear a lot from me, because all of you will know that I can never tire of talking. I have never needed a microphone or a script from which to speak. However, in order to keep my remarks brief, I have written guide points, and I will. And as evidence of that, here is the structure. I will first give words of thanks, then give you a brief glimpse into my appointment onto the Supreme Court bench in an era of an uneven playing field. I will mention my husband, maybe more than once. I will tell you very briefly about pressure that has been brought to bear on me from within and above. I may break out in song, but my family know I cannot carry a tune. So I may have to devise that idea, or you can help me. I'll save the dancing for later. I will not be quoting any jurists, but I may quote others, and I may use some injudicious language. The grandchildren had fallen asleep, maybe they will be. And then I will descend this bench, and I will move forward. Thanks. The greatest sacrifice that was made as I progressed in my career, especially in the early years, was made by my son Taj, who's not listening to me. I can remember him hanging onto my arm after my call to the bar. So was his need to have his mother's attention. He saw a cruise ship in the harbor and asked if we could go on a cruise. I promised him that cruise, and we took it. I have given a lot more out of love and because of his sacrifice. I was filled with pride the day he was called to the bar. Now I will have loads of time for his children. My siblings have had to suffer my garrulous ways for a long time, but they know how to bring me down a peg and shut me up. As a judge, I told them never to defend me,
And I am happy to say that they were happy not to. My friends have had to put up with criticisms that they have heard. They are tough-skinned. And when I say too much, I'm reminded that I was not appointed boss of the world. But when I have needed a break, to be refreshed, to get over the pressures of work, I could not have done it without them. I wish to thank all the registrars, assistant registrars, managers, supervisors, and staff of the 3 levels of court in Bermuda. The magistrates' court staff accepted me graciously into their building, and they have been very helpful to me, often giving me a cheery greeting when I entered the building and had a hangdog look on my face pre-coffee in the morning. Mrs. Mraz, Ms. Scott, Mr. Miller, of the Supreme Court Registry supported me in my work over the years in ways that I have insufficient time to explain. I would not say that I was high maintenance, although they may, but they put up with me, and I hold them dear for that. I am and will continue to be broken-hearted over the loss of Miss Lynch. We were in the same class in the bar group, and she had my back in the Supreme Court from day one. She covered for me when I would sneak off from the registry to watch one grand slam of tennis event or another. Tennis was our shared passion. I did not have a choice in Joy Robinson being assigned to me as administrative assistant, right, Mr. Morales? But she has been with me for almost as long as I have been a judge. I would not have traded her for the world. Faithfulness is important to me, and she epitomizes it. Discretion, patience, and a ready wit. She knows all my secrets. I sat on the bench in all jurisdictions of the court and was supported over and beyond the call of duty through the years by the registry staff. I cannot call all the names. The criminal division over which I've had a supervisory function has a new team now, but they all came in, caught on quickly, and assumed their tasks in a less than ideal time. They have given a refreshing meaning to my work. They love my stories. I love their dedication. I have never caught an eye roll, no matter the request I've made. Mrs. Nikita Dyer made me appear to be a great administrator of the list. But no, it was mostly her. Okay, it was all her. Thanks is so small a word for me to offer for such great public service. Now, I have not mentioned a certain person sitting down in front of me, and by now his ears are strained, listening for his name. It was my husband's belief that I could and should ascend to the Court of Appeal in due course. It was Mr. Coelho's design that I should do so post-haste. I have now had the honor, privilege, and pleasure to act as a Justice of Appeal and to sit on the Court of Appeal bench on occasion. I'm indebted to him for his tenacity and foresight in that regard. On even playing field, I was Registrar of the Supreme Court in early 1999 when I prepared 2 aide-memoirs for the then Attorney General, Ms. Lois Brown Evans, for her to present to Cabinet in order to do our bidding for us. One was to garner a commitment from government for better accommodation and conditions for the courts. Well, you will have no difficulty judging for yourselves that went down like a damp squid. Squibben. We have no Hall of Justice to accommodate the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal, and the courts continue to operate from several buildings and without adequate modern technology. But I will leave that there. The other aide memoir was to obtain funding for 2 full-time temporary judicial posts which are provided for under the Constitution, assistant justices. The vicissitudes of the office at that time required it. We succeeded in getting the posts financed, and I applied for one. My effort could have been derailed by the uneven playing field of subjective selection. Applications were to be made to the then Deputy Governor. 2 lawyers other than myself applied for the posts. The first to be selected, an Englishman working in the Attorney General's chambers, told me that he just wrote a letter to the Deputy Governor requesting the appointment and was successful. The other man who was selected was a magistrate. He told me that when the he told me that the Chief Justice, the then Chief Justice, telephoned him and offered him the post. He was appointed without more. Well, the two of them were familiar with each other. They hail from the same island to the south, aren't they? I wrote a letter of application, notwithstanding that I had been a magistrate and was at the time the registrar of the Supreme Court and Court of Appeal. I was asked for a full CV and to produce copies of opinions that I had written when I was in private practice. But not to be deterred, I produced opinions that I had written as acting Solicitor General and judgments that I had written as Registrar of the Supreme Court. Now, neither of those temporary judges are on the bench anymore, or were on the bench for very long, and that deputy governor is long gone. As for me, this brings to mind the immortal words in Elton John's song, I'm still standing, that I never did, looking like a true survivor, feeling like a little kid, I'm still standing, after all this time, yeah. I found it was cringy. Pressure. I said I would talk about pressure that had been brought to bear on me as a judge from within and above. I will give one example of pressure from within. I'm so glad I had a chance when clearing out my chambers, well, then Miss Joy Rumps was clearing out my chambers, to go through reams of documents and papers that I had filed over the years, or I might have forgotten about this. At the middle of a trial, at the no-case stage, I released the defendant. The then Chief Justice, not present today, wrote me a memo in which he said, quote, Charles-Etta, I see that you are up to it again. You will get a reputation for this. No, you have a reputation for this. And have you seen the comments on the blogs? What they have said about you? Close quotes. I wrote back, and this is all I said. But, Chief Justice, a lot has been said about me through the years. Some that I would not repeat to a gentleman like you. I'm still standing. At least to close a business club. I will give you 3 instances of pressure from above. Under the Bermuda Constitution, the governor appoints Supreme Court judges to the bench. Firstly, notwithstanding my being a Bermudian, dare I say for illustration purposes a born Bermudian, and contrary to practice, convention, and the Constitution, the then governor appointed me to the substantive post of Supreme Court judge under a 5-year contract. Contracts had hitherto been reserved for foreigners only, and that it had gone on for years. He was, of course, doing the Secretary of State's bidding. So, see how far up the pressure came from? Justice Kennedy, as he was then, was appointed under contract as I was. It was in 2003, I believe. In more recent years, contrary to practice, I was denied the full extension from age 65 to age 70 by another governor. And lastly, judges were pressured by the then governor to join in the government's austerity measures. Let me make it plain, none of this was done by the current governor, for whom I have the greatest respect. And I'm not suggesting that I did not respect those other governments. I did not respect what they were doing, and I would not accept it. I fought hard against all of that pressure. I did my research and presented fully written, cogent arguments against all the incursions that were being made. I used our Constitution, international conventions, examples from around the Commonwealth, and other tools and authority that I could find. Surprisingly, what I found was a passion that I did not know I possessed. You know, that kind of passion that is evidenced by Nina Simone during the rigors of the civil rights struggle in America. She wrote a song. She shocked many by singing it at Carnegie Hall. She passionately sang a scathing indictment on America's black-white inequality. She sang, now this one I can't sing. Alabama's got me so upset. Tennessee made me lose my rest. And everybody knows about Mississippi. Goddamn. That's the kind of passion I felt when fighting the pressure being brought to bear on a judge from within and above. But I was not fighting for myself. I was fighting for the independence of the judiciary. It is enshrined in our Constitution. It is crucial to the healthy maintenance of a democratic society. It undergirds the rule of law. I was willing to be slept down, go down in flames, but I'm happy to say I won those battles. Those governors are now gone, and at 69 years and 364 days, I'm still standing here. I have encouraged those I knew, if indeed, to respect judicial independence. You know, there are places in the world, even within the British Commonwealth, where judges have been disappeared, assassinated, stripped of their independence, put under house arrest, or sent to prison without trial. I was in my heart and in my small way fighting for them too. My husband, Dr. Eddie Gola, Femi Bada, fondly known as Femi, should have been here. After all, he was my greatest supporter, and he believed in me beyond my own imagination. He always told me that I was too self-effacing, that I did not take compliments regarding the work that I did graciously. He was my hero, but I used to tell him that he was far more intelligent than me, but that I would always be right. But you know, he was right about me not recognizing my work. That brings to mind a poem, Into the End, by the Scott poet Robbie Burns. It's called The Louse. I know, lousy name. I would quote it in Scott, but I run the risk of offending someone present. But in any event, it is not on all fours as an analogy. I will just borrow some words and a sentence. A rough translation involves a plea or a prayer for some power, maybe God, to give us the gift of seeing ourselves as others see us. During the last 2 weeks, I have been feted and fattened. It's not over yet. I have received many lovely gifts in appreciation of my service. But the greatest gift that I have received is the one that you have given me today. The gift of seeing myself as you have seen me. And for that, I shall be eternally grateful. Thank you.
Simmons. But I'd just like to thank all the speakers who have made contributions today. Mr. Melvin Douglas, on behalf of the Attorney General, Mr. Scott Bierman, Shadow Attorney General, Cindy Clark, the Director of Public Prosecutions, Mr. Pettingill, Mr. Jerome Lynch, Ms. Harvey, Mr. Michael Smith, Ms. Elizabeth Christopher, Lord Attai Sterling, and of course Victoria Bierman. And I also like to thank former Chief Justice Cabley for attending this special sitting, as the former Registrar and the Permanent Secretary. I want to associate myself with many of the contributions which were made today. You would have seen from those contributions that Justice Simmons is a much admired judge in Bermuda. Melvin Douglas spoke of courtesy, patience, and compassion. And Scott Bierman spoke about the judge being a fair and firm judge. The DPP, Cindy Clark, she said that Justice Simmons was held in much admiration, true to the oath of doing justice to all, enormous capacity to listen, tolerance for all, kindness and patience as teacher, personified kindness. Mr. Pettingill spoke of highly regarded judge, encouraging counsel to do their very best. And Mr. Lynch, Queen's Counsel, spoke of generous and welcoming judge to overseas counsel, remained judicial on the bench. The defendants did not feel that they had an unfair trial. They all felt that they had a fair hearing, being a good judge and the best legacy to have. Mr. Smith spoke about Justice Simmons being an excellent judge. He said that is a legacy, an outstanding career as a judge. Ms. Christopher spoke of her fairness. Even if she ruled against you, it always feels right. No one feels that they were treated badly, never looked down on anyone. Each person was treated with respect. Mr. Atwright Sterling spoke of Justice Simmons' courteous counsel, fair and firm. Everyone felt that they had been listened to, epitomized what a good judge should be, a trailblazer. And Ms. Spearman spoke of has faithfully kept the judicial oaths, have had a powerful positive impact, exemplified judicial excellence, and a master communicator. These are all words which describe a judge who is admired by the legal community, much admired. And let me close by saying that public service needs to be recognized and applauded. And certainly public service of this duration needs to be acknowledged and appreciated. I do acknowledge and appreciate Justice Simmons' public service on behalf of the Bermuda judiciary. I wish to thank Justice Simmons for a long and distinguished service to the administration of justice in Bermuda. In particular, I want to thank her for her contribution in the criminal field over the last 20 years, for her leadership role as the supervising judge of the criminal list, and seeking to provide a level of administration in the criminal field during the difficult period of COVID epidemic. As many of our contributions, many of the contributors show, Justice Simmons is a much admired judge. We are grateful for her many contributions over the last 30 years and wish her a happy, healthy, and successful retirement. So with that, the special sitting is now concluded. Thank you.
Everyone rise.